The bullet had missed Beatrice Randall's head by less than an inch that afternoon in May of 1878, and she had not even flinched before firing back, her shot finding its mark in the shoulder of the cattle rustler who had tried to make off with 3 of her best heifers. Now, as the sun dipped below the Montana mountains surrounding Deer Lodge, she stood on the wide porch of the ranch house her late husband had built 5 years ago, watching the stranger ride up the dusty trail toward her property. Beatrice was 26 years old, widowed for 2 years, and had no intention of ever needing anyone again. Thomas Randall had been a good man, taken too soon by pneumonia during a harsh winter, and she had discovered in the aftermath of her grief that she was perfectly capable of running the ranch herself. More than capable, in fact. The hands respected her, feared her a little, and she liked it that way. The rider approached slowly, his horse tired but well kept. Beatrice's hand drifted to the rifle leaning against the porch railing, a habitual gesture more than a threatening one. She had learned to be cautious. A woman alone in Montana territory attracted all manner of attention, most of it unwelcome. "Evening, madam," the stranger called out when he was close enough, pulling his horse to a stop a respectful distance from the porch. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair touched with early gray at the temples, though he could not have been much older than 30. "I am looking for work. Heard in town you might be hiring." Beatrice studied him with the same critical eye she used when evaluating livestock. He was tall, lean but strong-looking, with hands that showed the calluses of honest labor. His clothes were worn but clean, his saddle well-maintained. Most importantly, his eyes met hers directly, without the challenging stare some men used when they encountered a woman in charge, nor the dismissive glance others employed. "I have a full crew," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the evening air. "With respect, madam, I heard different. Harry Thornton at the general store mentioned you lost 2 hands last week when they headed north to the gold fields." Beatrice suppressed a smile. Harry could not keep his mouth shut if his life depended on it. "Even if that were true, what makes you think I would hire a drifter I know nothing about?" The stranger shifted in his saddle, and Beatrice noticed he favored his left side slightly. "An old injury, perhaps. Name is Porter Nichols. I have worked cattle from Texas to Wyoming. I can break horses, mend fences, handle a branding iron, and I know my way around an account book if needed. I do not drink to excess, do not gamble, and I have never stolen so much as a biscuit that was not mine." He paused, then added, "I can provide references, but they are all several hundred miles from here, so that might not be immediately helpful." "Why Deer Lodge?" Beatrice asked. "Why not keep riding to the gold fields like everyone else?" Porter Nichols settled his hat back on his head, and she caught a glimpse of something weary in his expression. "I have had my fill of chasing dreams, madam. I am looking for honest work, regular pay, and a place to settle for a while, maybe permanently if it suits." Beatrice made her decision quickly, as she always did. Thomas used to tease her about it, said she could assess a situation faster than anyone he had ever known. $25 a month plus room and board in the bunkhouse. You work dawn to dusk, longer during calving season or roundup. You take orders from me, not from any of the other hands who might have opinions about a woman running this ranch. First sign of trouble, drinking, or laziness, you are gone. Clear. A slow smile crossed Porter's face, transforming it from merely handsome to something warmer. "Crystal clear, madam." "When do I start?" "First light tomorrow. Bunkhouse is the building to the left. Cookie will have supper ready within the hour. Do not be late." Porter touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement and guided his horse toward the barn. Beatrice watched him go, already second-guessing herself. She did not need complications, and something about Porter Nichols suggested he might be exactly that. Over the following weeks, Beatrice discovered that Porter Nichols was as good as his word. He worked tirelessly, never complained, and handled every task she assigned with quiet competence. More surprisingly, he seemed genuinely unbothered by taking orders from a woman. While some of the other hands occasionally bristled or made comments they thought she could not hear, Porter simply did what needed doing. What unsettled Beatrice was how often she found herself watching him work. The way he gentled a skittish horse with patience and soft words. The careful attention he paid when repairing a section of fence, making sure every post was secure. The way he listened when old Bill Thompson told his rambling stories around the evening fire, actually listening rather than just waiting for the old man to finish. It was late June when the real trouble started. Beatrice had ridden out to check on the northern pastures, where the grass grew thick near a tributary of the Clark Fork River. She had left Porter and two other hands, Jake Summers and Pete Whitmore, working on reinforcing the corral gates after a spooked bull had damaged them the previous week. She was halfway back to the ranch house when she heard the shouting. Touching her heels to her mare's flanks, Beatrice urged the horse into a gallop, her heart hammering. The sounds of conflict grew louder as she approached, and she arrived to find Jake and Pete squaring off against Porter, their faces red with anger. "What the hell is going on here?" Beatrice demanded, sliding from her saddle before her horse had fully stopped. "This son of a bitch thinks he can tell us what to do," Jake snarled, his hand hovering near the gun at his hip. Porter stood with his hands loose at his sides, his expression calm but alert. "I simply pointed out that the gate would not hold if they used green wood for the supports. Mrs. Randall gave specific instructions about how she wanted it done. "We have been working this ranch longer than you have been in Montana," Pete interjected. "We know how things are done here." Beatrice felt the familiar anger rising in her chest. This was not about the gate or the wood or Porter's suggestions. This was about pride and stubbornness and men who could not accept that times were changing. "You are both fired," she said flatly. "Collect your pay from the house and be off my land within the hour." Jake's eyes widened. "Now wait just a minute, Mrs. Randall. You cannot run this place without us. You need experienced hands, not some drifter who—" "I said you are fired." Beatrice's voice could have cut glass. "Do not make me repeat myself a third time." The two men exchanged glances, clearly shocked. They had expected her to back down, to placate them, to choose their experience over Porter's newness. When neither of them moved, Beatrice pulled her revolver from its holster and held it steady at her side. Not pointed at them, but the message was clear enough. "Jesus, you have lost your mind," Jake muttered, but he turned and stalked toward the bunkhouse. Pete followed, shaking his head. Once they were out of earshot, Porter let out a long breath. "You did not have to do that, madam. I could have worked around them." "I will not tolerate insubordination," Beatrice said, holstering her weapon. "And I will not have hands who cannot follow simple instructions about quality work." She looked at the partially completed gate, noting immediately what Porter had seen. The wood Jake and Pete had chosen was indeed too green, would warp within a month. "You were right about the wood. Finish the job properly, then come up to the house. We need to discuss hiring replacements." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Porter, thank you for backing my authority, even when it put you at risk. Madam, you are the boss. That is not a complicated concept, regardless of whether you wear trousers or a dress." Something in his tone made Beatrice look back at him more carefully. There was no mockery there, no hidden agenda she could detect, just plain honesty. It was refreshing and unsettling in equal measure. That evening, Porter knocked on the door of the ranch house just as the sun was painting the mountains gold and purple. Beatrice had changed from her work clothes into a simple cotton dress, though she had kept her hair in its practical braid. She gestured for him to come in, suddenly aware that she had not had a man other than old Bill Thompson inside the house since Thomas died. "Sit," she said, indicating the chair across from Thomas's old desk, where she now kept the ranch accounts. "I have been thinking about the hiring situation. Losing two hands at once is not ideal, but neither is keeping men who undermine my decisions." Porter settled into the chair, looking slightly uncomfortable in the more formal setting. "I might know of someone. Man I worked with in Wyoming, name of Daniel Cross. Good with cattle, better with horses, trustworthy. Can you contact him?" "I can send a telegram to the last place I knew he was working. Might take a few weeks to get word back." Beatrice nodded, making a note. "Do it. In the meantime, we will manage with who we have. It will mean longer hours for everyone. The hands will not mind. They know you are fair." "Fair." Beatrice tested the word. "Is that what they say about me?" Porter met her eyes directly. "They say you are tough but fair, that you work as hard as any of them, that you know cattle and land better than most men twice your age. They respect you, Mrs. Randall. But—" a slight smile tugged at his mouth. "But some of them worry you are going to work yourself to death before you are 30, that you never rest, never take time for anything but this ranch." Beatrice stiffened. "My personal life is not their concern." "No, madam, it is not. But people who work alongside someone tend to care about them, whether it is their business or not." Porter stood, clearly sensing he had overstepped. "I will send that telegram first thing tomorrow." After he left, Beatrice sat alone in the growing darkness, his words echoing in her mind. She had been so focused on proving she could manage alone, on showing the world that a widow did not need rescuing, that she had not stopped to consider what she might be sacrificing in the process. But that was the point, was it not? She did not want to need anyone. Needing people meant losing them, meant the kind of pain she had felt when Thomas died. Better to be alone and strong than vulnerable and broken. July brought scorching heat and the hard work of the summer roundup. Porter's friend Daniel Cross arrived, a quiet man in his early 30s with gentle hands and a gift for calming nervous horses. With the crew back to full strength, the work proceeded smoothly. Beatrice found herself falling into a rhythm she had not experienced since Thomas was alive, a sense of partnership that made the endless tasks seem less overwhelming. Porter had a way of anticipating what needed to be done, of being exactly where he was needed without having to be asked. When a section of the southern fence came down during a storm, he had already gathered the tools and materials before Beatrice could organize a repair crew. When old Bill took sick with a summer fever, Porter sat up with him through 2 long nights, making sure he drank enough water and did not get worse. "You do not have to do that," Beatrice told him on the second night, bringing fresh water and clean cloths to the bunkhouse. "Bill is not your responsibility." Porter looked up from where he sat beside the old man's bunk, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "He is part of this crew. That makes him my responsibility." "That kind of thinking will wear you down," Beatrice said, but there was no sharpness in her tone. "Maybe," Porter acknowledged, "but I have spent enough years looking out only for myself. It gets lonely." Beatrice wanted to argue, to tell him that self-reliance was strength, that needing others was weakness. But the words died in her throat as she watched him wring out a cloth and gently wipe Bill's fevered forehead. There was a kind of strength in caring, she realized. A different kind than she had been practicing, but strength nonetheless. Bill recovered, as ornery and talkative as ever, and the summer work continued. Beatrice found herself seeking out Porter's opinion more often, asking him to ride with her when she checked on distant pastures. They talked about cattle and weather and the best methods for breaking horses, but occasionally the conversations drifted into more personal territory. "Did you always want to be a cowboy?" she asked one afternoon as they paused to water their horses at a creek. Porter considered the question. "Not always. My father was a schoolteacher in Pennsylvania. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, get an education, live a respectable life in town." He smiled at some private memory. "But I was terrible at sitting still, hated being indoors. When I was 18, I headed west and never looked back. Do you regret it?" "No, though sometimes I think my father was disappointed I did not become the man he hoped I would be." Beatrice understood that feeling. Her own father had expected her to remarry within months of Thomas's death, to find a man who would take over the ranch and allow her to return to the proper sphere of women's work. Their relationship had been strained ever since she had made it clear that was never going to happen. "What about you?" Porter asked. "Did you always want to run a ranch?" "I never really thought about it," Beatrice admitted. "I married Thomas when I was 20. He already had this land, had built the house with his own hands. I thought we would build a life together, raise children, grow old watching our family expand." She paused, surprised at how easily the words came. She rarely spoke about Thomas, about the future they had planned. "But then he died and I had to choose. Sell everything and go back to my family in Ohio, dependent and defeated, or learn to stand on my own. It was not really a choice at all." "You have done more than stand on your own," Porter said quietly. "You have built something remarkable here." "Built it alone," Beatrice corrected, though the words felt hollow even as she said them. Porter was quiet for a moment, then said, "There is no shame in accepting help, Mrs. Randall. Being strong does not mean carrying every burden by yourself." Beatrice wanted to argue, but something in his tone stopped her. He was not criticizing her or suggesting she was weak. He was simply offering a different perspective, one she had been too stubborn to consider. August arrived with afternoon thunderstorms that turned the mountains purple and filled the air with the scent of lightning and wet earth. Beatrice was reviewing the account books one evening when she heard a commotion outside. Grabbing her rifle, she stepped onto the porch to find 3 riders approaching at speed, their horses lathered and wild-eyed. Porter emerged from the barn, and Daniel appeared from the bunkhouse, both men alert and ready. Beatrice recognized the lead rider as Samuel Henderson, whose ranch bordered hers to the west. "Beatrice," Samuel called out, pulling his horse to a sliding stop. "We need help. Cattle rustlers hit my place this afternoon. They got away with nearly 50 head, heading northeast toward the mountains. I have got men tracking them, but we need more riders if we are going to catch them before they disappear into the high country." Beatrice did not hesitate. "How many rustlers?" "At least 6, maybe more. They are well armed and know the territory. Give me 5 minutes." Beatrice turned to Porter. "Saddle my horse and yours. Daniel, get the other hands ready. We ride as soon as everyone is mounted." Porter caught her arm gently. "Mrs. Randall, this could be dangerous. Maybe you should, maybe I should what?" Beatrice's eyes flashed. "Stay here like a helpless woman while men handle the real work. This is my community, my responsibility as much as anyone's. I was going to say maybe you should let me ride point, since I have experience tracking in the dark," Porter finished calmly. "But if you would rather assume I am questioning your capability instead of trying to keep you safe, that is your choice." Beatrice felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I apologize. That was unfair." "You are quick to see challenges where none exist," Porter said, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "Someday maybe you will trust that some people want to stand beside you, not in front of you or behind you, beside you." There was no time to unpack that statement. Within minutes, they were mounted and riding hard through the gathering darkness. Samuel's trackers had left clear markers, and Porter proved as skilled as he had claimed, reading the signs even in the dim light. They rode for 2 hours, pushing the horses as hard as they dared, before they spotted the rustlers' campfire in a narrow canyon ahead. Samuel's men were positioned on the southern ridge. Beatrice led her hands to the north, effectively boxing the rustlers in. As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Samuel called out to the thieves, demanding their surrender. What followed was tense but mercifully brief. The rustlers, realizing they were trapped and outnumbered, gave up without a fight. 2 of them turned out to be young men barely out of their teens, probably convinced that stealing cattle was an easy path to riches. The others were harder cases, but none were willing to die for 50 stolen cows. As the prisoners were being secured, one of the older rustlers made a break for it, lunging for a rifle that had been set aside. Beatrice reacted instinctively, spurring her horse forward and knocking the man down before he could reach the weapon. The rustler stumbled, reached for the gun anyway, and Beatrice's shot rang out, striking the dirt inches from his hand. "The next one goes through your wrist," she said coldly. "Your choice." The man froze, then slowly raised his hands in surrender. Porter appeared at her side, his own weapon drawn. "Nice shooting." "I meant to miss," Beatrice said, surprised to find her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. "I do not want to kill anyone if I can help it." "That is why you are a better person than most," Porter said quietly. The ride back to Samuel's ranch took most of the morning. The stolen cattle were recovered, the rustlers turned over to the town marshal, and Samuel insisted on feeding everyone before they headed home. It was late afternoon by the time Beatrice and her hands finally returned to her ranch. She was exhausted, covered in dust and sweat, and wanted nothing more than a bath and her bed. But as she dismounted, Porter was there, taking her horse's reins. "You should rest," he said. "I should check on the evening chores," Beatrice countered automatically. "The evening chores will get done. They always do." Porter's voice was gentle but firm. "You have been up for nearly 24 hours. You have ridden hard enough to wear out 2 horses, and you nearly had to shoot a man. That is enough for one day." Beatrice wanted to argue, but the truth was she was swaying on her feet. "Fine. But make sure the south pasture gates are secured. The latch on the main one has been sticking." "Already on my list," Porter assured her. "Now go inside before you fall over." Beatrice managed a tired smile. "You are getting awfully comfortable giving me orders." "Just following your example, madam. You are the most stubborn person I have ever met." As she walked toward the house, Beatrice found herself thinking about what Porter had said earlier about standing beside her. No one had offered that in the 2 years since Thomas died. People had offered to help, offered to take over, offered to buy the ranch or run it for her. But no one had simply offered to share the load, to be a partner rather than a replacement. She thought about that for a long time while she soaked in the copper bathtub, washing away the grime and exhaustion of the past day. She thought about it as she fell into bed and slept dreamlessly through the afternoon and night. And she was still thinking about it when she woke the next morning to find Porter had already started the day's work, but had left fresh coffee warming on her stove, and a note saying the south pasture gate had been fixed. September brought the work of preparing for winter. Hay had to be cut and stored, fences repaired before the snow made the work impossible, cattle moved to lower pastures. It was during this season that Beatrice began to notice how much her perspective had shifted. She caught herself smiling at Porter's dry observations about the weather. She found excuses to work alongside him rather than assigning him to distant tasks. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed at something Daniel said, the careful attention he paid when old Bill told stories everyone had heard a dozen times before. One evening in late September, as the first real cold front moved in from the north, Beatrice was working in the barn when Porter appeared carrying an armload of fresh straw. "Thought we should make sure the horses have extra bedding tonight," he said. "Temperature is supposed to drop below freezing." Beatrice nodded, watching as he spread the straw in one of the stalls. "Porter, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really come to Deer Lodge? You said you were tired of chasing dreams, but I think there is more to it than that." Porter paused in his work, considering his answer. "I was engaged once. Woman named Caroline back in Wyoming. She was beautiful, charming, everything I thought I wanted." He resumed spreading the straw, not meeting Beatrice's eyes. "Turned out she was more interested in the idea of taming a wild cowboy than in actually sharing a life with one. When I told her I wanted to settle down, find a permanent position, build something stable, she lost interest, said I had become boring." "I am sorry," Beatrice said softly. "Do not be. It taught me something important. I had been trying to be what I thought she wanted, changing myself to fit her expectations. When I finally offered her my real self, my true goals and dreams, she did not want any of it." Porter looked up and his eyes found hers. "I came to Deer Lodge because I wanted to find work with someone who valued honesty and capability over charm and pretense. I stayed because I found something I was not looking for." "What was that?" "A woman who is so fiercely independent she cannot see that sharing her strength with someone else would not diminish it. It would multiply it." The air in the barn seemed to thicken. Beatrice felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "Porter, I am not asking you to change, Beatrice." It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sent a shiver through her. "I am not asking you to be less than you are or to let me take over any part of what you have built here. I am just asking you to consider that maybe, possibly, you do not have to face everything alone anymore. That maybe letting someone stand beside you is not the same as being weak or dependent." Beatrice found she could not speak. All the walls she had built so carefully over the past 2 years, all the certainty that she needed no one, wavered in the face of his quiet declaration. "You do not have to answer now," Porter said, returning to his work as if he had not just turned her world sideways. "I just wanted you to know, in case it matters." It mattered. That was the terrifying part. It mattered so much that Beatrice lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her bedroom, trying to reconcile the woman she had become with the possibility of being something more. She had been so focused on proving she did not need anyone that she had not stopped to ask herself if she might want someone anyway. The next few weeks were a study in awkwardness and revelation. Beatrice found herself hyper-aware of Porter's presence, noticing details she had ignored before. The way he always made sure she had eaten during long workdays, the care he took with injured animals, the respect he showed to everyone on the ranch, regardless of their position. She also noticed the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching. There was admiration in those glances, but also something warmer, something that made her breath catch. October arrived with golden aspens and crisp mornings. The first snow dusted the mountain peaks, a reminder that winter was coming whether they were ready or not. Beatrice and Porter were riding the fence line along the eastern boundary when her horse stumbled in a hidden depression, throwing her hard to the ground. She landed badly, her ankle twisting beneath her. Pain shot up her leg, sharp enough to steal her breath. Porter was off his horse and at her side in seconds. "Do not move," he said, his hands gentle as he examined her ankle. "Can you wiggle your toes?" "Yes," Beatrice managed through gritted teeth. "I think it is just sprained." Just sprained still means you are not walking back to the ranch." Porter did not wait for her protest. He lifted her carefully, settling her on his horse before mounting behind her. His arms came around her to hold the reins, effectively cradling her against his chest. Beatrice knew she should object, should insist she could ride her own horse. But the pain in her ankle was considerable, and the warmth of Porter's body against hers felt safer than she wanted to admit. "You are shaking," Porter said quietly as they started back toward the ranch house. "My ankle hurts." "That is not why you are shaking." He was right, and they both knew it. Beatrice was not shaking from pain but from the overwhelming realization that she felt protected for the first time in 2 years. Not helpless, not diminished, but genuinely cared for. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Porter," she said softly, "what if I do not know how to do this?" "Do what?" "Share, trust, let someone in." She paused. "What if I have forgotten how to be anything other than alone?" Porter's arms tightened slightly around her. "Then we will figure it out together." "That is what sharing means, Beatrice. You do not have to know all the answers before you begin. You just have to be willing to try." Back at the ranch house, Porter carried her inside despite her protests and settled her on the sofa. He sent Daniel to town for the doctor, then proceeded to make her comfortable with pillows and blankets, his movements efficient but tender. "I can take care of myself," Beatrice said, but there was no heat in the words. "I know you can. But why should you have to when I am right here?" Porter met her eyes steadily. "This is not about capability, Beatrice. It is about caring. About wanting to ease your burden not because I think you are weak, but because I think you are extraordinary and you deserve someone who sees that." The doctor confirmed it was a bad sprain that would require her to stay off the ankle for at least 2 weeks. Beatrice's first instinct was to argue, to insist she could not afford to be laid up during such a critical time. But Porter quietly took charge, organizing the hands to handle the essential tasks, bringing her reports each evening so she could stay informed, asking her opinion on decisions, but not requiring her to be physically present for every moment. It was infuriating and liberating in equal measure. Beatrice discovered that the ranch did not fall apart without her constant oversight. The hands were capable and motivated. Porter was an excellent foreman, firm but fair, and the work proceeded smoothly. More than that, she discovered she did not hate being cared for. Porter brought her meals, sat with her in the evenings discussing the day's events, read to her from the newspaper when her eyes grew tired. They talked about everything and nothing. His childhood in Pennsylvania, her early married life with Thomas, the dreams they each carried for the future. "What do you want, Beatrice?" Porter asked one evening as they sat by the fireplace. "Not what you think you should want, not what would prove something to someone else. What do you actually want for your life?" No one had ever asked her that, not her father, not even Thomas. They had all assumed they knew what was best for her. "I want this ranch to thrive," she said slowly, thinking through each word. "I want to build something lasting, something I can be proud of. I want to wake up each morning excited about the work ahead." She paused, then added more quietly, "And I want to stop being so afraid of needing someone that I push away something that could be beautiful." Porter reached over and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but gentle. "I love you, Beatrice Randall. I love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you face every challenge without backing down. I love that you can shoot straighter than any man I have ever known, and that you are not afraid to get your hands dirty. But mostly I love who you are when you let your guard down, when you stop trying to prove something and just exist." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. "I do not know if I remember how to love someone. Thomas and I grew into love slowly over time. This is different, faster, more intense." Love does not have to look the same every time, Porter said. Ours will be whatever we make it. There is no right or wrong way as long as it is honest. Beatrice squeezed his hand. I am terrified. Me too. But I would rather be terrified together than safe and alone. She kissed him then, leaning across the small space between their chairs, her hand cupping his face. It was not her first kiss, but it felt like it in all the ways that mattered. Porter responded with a tenderness that made her heart ache, his hand threading through her hair as he deepened the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Beatrice found herself laughing. I am supposed to be resting my ankle, not raising my heart rate, Porter grinned. I will try to contain my devastating romantic appeal. Too late for that. Over the next week, as Beatrice's ankle healed, their relationship shifted into something both of them could feel solidifying. They did not hide their growing affection from the ranch hands, and to Beatrice's surprise, the men seemed genuinely pleased. Old Bill went so far as to corner her one morning and tell her it was about time she found someone worthy of her. Thomas would have liked him, Bill said, his weathered face sincere. He would have wanted you to be happy, Mrs. Randall. You know that, right? Beatrice did know it. Thomas had been a good man, a loving husband, but he had never expected her to spend the rest of her life in mourning. The guilt she had been carrying, the sense that moving forward meant betraying his memory, began to ease. By late October, Beatrice was back to full duties, though Porter still treated her ankle with exaggerated care that made her roll her eyes even as she secretly appreciated his concern. They fell into a partnership that felt natural, dividing responsibilities based on skill and preference rather than rigid roles. One evening, as the first serious snow of the season began to fall, Porter found Beatrice in the barn checking on a mare who was due to foal soon. She is restless, Beatrice said, running a soothing hand along the mare's neck. I think it might be tonight. Want company for the watch? Porter asked. I would like that. They settled in together, speaking quietly as the hours passed and the snow continued to fall outside. Around midnight, the mare's labor began in earnest. Beatrice and Porter worked together seamlessly, offering support and assistance as needed. Just before dawn, a healthy foal arrived, all long legs and wide eyes. Beautiful, Porter breathed, watching the baby struggle to stand. Beatrice looked at him instead of the foal, seeing the wonder in his face. Porter, I want you to know something. When Thomas died, I thought that was the end of that part of my life. I thought I would focus on the ranch, on proving I could survive alone, and that would be enough. But you have shown me that there is more than one way to be strong, that admitting I want someone beside me does not make me weak or dependent. It just makes me honest. Porter turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the lamplight. Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying I love you. I am saying I want to build a life with you, not because I need rescuing or cannot manage on my own, but because life is better when you are in it. I am saying yes to standing beside each other. Porter pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I will try every day to be worthy of that trust. You already are. They married in December, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Deer Lodge. Beatrice wore a dress of deep green wool, practical but beautiful, and Porter wore his best suit with his boots polished to a shine. The ranch hands attended, along with neighbors like Samuel Henderson and his family, Harry from the general store, and even the doctor who had treated Beatrice's ankle. Standing before the minister, Beatrice felt a sense of rightness she had not expected. This was not replacing Thomas or forgetting what she had lost. This was choosing to move forward, to embrace a future that honored both her independence and her heart. Do you, Beatrice Randall, take this man to be your husband? The minister asked. I do, she said clearly, meeting Porter's eyes. As my partner, my equal, and my love. The minister raised an eyebrow at the addition, but Porter's smile was radiant. When it was his turn, he said, "I do." As her partner, her equal, and her love. They sealed their vows with a kiss that prompted cheers from the assembled guests. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn and enough food to feed twice as many people. Cookie had outdone himself, and even Old Bill had contributed his special apple pie recipe. As the evening wore on and the music started, Porter led Beatrice onto the makeshift dance floor. "Happy?" he asked, holding her close as they swayed to the fiddle music. "More than I thought possible," Beatrice admitted. "You know this does not mean I am going to stop running the ranch or start staying home to do needlework." Porter laughed. "I would be disappointed if you did. I married you because you are fierce and capable and stubborn as hell, not despite those qualities. I have no interest in changing you." "Good, because I have no interest in being changed. Though maybe we can work on you accepting help occasionally without treating it like a personal affront." Beatrice swatted his shoulder. "I am getting better at that." "You are," Porter agreed, "but it is still a work in progress." They danced until late into the night, surrounded by friends and neighbors who had watched Beatrice fight to maintain her independence and were now celebrating her choice to share her life. It felt like a completion of something, a circle closing and opening simultaneously. Their first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The winter was harsh, testing their resources and their resilience. Beatrice and Porter worked side by side through blizzards and frozen pipes, through difficult calvings and equipment failures. They argued sometimes, usually when Beatrice tried to handle too much alone or when Porter pushed too hard for her to rest. But they also laughed together, made plans together, and built something stronger than either of them could have created alone. The ranch thrived under their combined management. Beatrice's knowledge of the land and stock combined with Porter's experience in expanding operations led to their best year on record. In the spring, Porter surprised Beatrice by bringing home a fine mare from a ranch in Wyoming. "For breeding," he explained. "I thought we could start building up the horse stock, diversify a bit." Beatrice ran her hands over the mare's sleek coat, recognizing quality when she saw it. "This must have cost a fortune." "It was an investment in our future," Porter said. "Besides, I know how much you love working with horses. I thought you might enjoy building that part of the ranch." It was these moments that reminded Beatrice why she had chosen to open her heart again. Porter did not try to control or direct her interests. He supported them, enhanced them, made space for her dreams to expand alongside his own. By their second anniversary, the ranch had grown significantly. They had hired 3 additional hands, built a new barn specifically for the horses, and were making plans to purchase additional land to the south. But the growth Beatrice treasured most was not measured in acres or livestock. She had learned to share not just the work, but also the worry, the joy, and the quiet moments. She had learned that asking Porter for help did not diminish her capabilities, but instead freed both of them to focus on what they did best. She had learned that love could be a partnership of equals rather than a surrender of self. In the fall of their 3rd year together, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mix of joy and fear. She had wanted children with Thomas, but had not conceived during their marriage. Now, at 29, she was thrilled at the prospect but also worried about how a baby would affect everything she had built. Porter found her one evening standing on the porch, her hand resting on her still flat stomach staring out at the mountains. "Worried?" he asked gently, coming to stand beside her. "Terrified," Beatrice admitted. "What if I am not any good at this? What if I cannot balance being a mother and running the ranch? What if Porter took her hand? What if we raise our child the same way we run this ranch? As partners, supporting each other, making decisions together. You do not have to be perfect at everything, Beatrice. You just have to try, and let me help when you need it. When did you become so wise? I married the most stubborn woman in Montana. I had to learn to be wise in self-defense. Their son was born in May of 1882, during a late spring snowstorm that blanketed the mountains in white. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Beatrice thought she might not survive it. But Porter stayed with her throughout, ignoring the doctor's suggestion that he wait elsewhere, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, wailing lustily, the doctor placed him in Beatrice's arms. She looked down at the red-faced infant and felt her heart expand in ways she had not imagined possible. "He is perfect," she whispered. "Just like his mother," Porter said, kissing her forehead gently. They named him Thomas Porter Nichols, honoring both the past and the present. Young Tommy proved to be healthy and strong lunged, keeping them awake at all hours and demanding attention with the same fierce determination his mother was known for. Beatrice discovered that motherhood was both harder and more rewarding than she had anticipated. The ranch did not stop requiring her attention, but she found ways to balance both roles. She wore Tommy in a sling while she checked on the livestock during his early months. Later, as he grew, she would set him on a blanket in the barn while she worked, talking to him about the horses and cattle. Porter was an attentive father, taking over night feedings when he could and never treating the baby as exclusively Beatrice's responsibility. He had the same patience with Tommy that he showed when breaking horses, a gentle firmness that helped the baby thrive. Old Bill retired the year Tommy turned 2, though he stayed on in a small cabin on the ranch property. He declared that someone needed to keep an eye on things and teach the boy proper skills as he grew. Beatrice suspected the real reason was that Bill had nowhere else to go and considered the ranch his home. Either way, she was happy to have him close by. The ranch continued to prosper. Their horse breeding program became well known throughout Montana, and buyers came from as far as Wyoming and Idaho to purchase their stock. Beatrice's reputation as a savvy businesswoman grew, but now she was also known for being half of a formidable partnership. People spoke of the Nichols Ranch with respect, acknowledging both her and Porter's contributions. When Tommy was 4, Beatrice found herself pregnant again. This time she was less fearful, having learned that she could indeed balance motherhood and her other responsibilities. Their daughter, Elizabeth Rose, was born in the fall of 1886, a quieter baby than her brother but with the same determined set to her jaw that marked her as Beatrice's child. 2 is probably enough, Beatrice said one night, holding baby Elizabeth while Tommy slept in his small bed across the room. "The ranch is growing and we have our hands full as it is." Porter, who was dandling Elizabeth on his knee, smiled. "Whatever you think is best, though I would not object to a house full of children if you wanted it. Let us see how these 2 turn out first," Beatrice said with a laugh. As the years passed, Beatrice watched her children grow and the ranch flourish. Tommy showed an early interest in horses, following Porter around and asking endless questions. Elizabeth was quieter but proved to have a gift for numbers, often found with the account books even before she could fully read. On their 10th anniversary, Porter surprised Beatrice by arranging for the hands to manage the ranch for a week while they took a trip to Helena. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch for more than a day since their wedding, and Beatrice felt strange leaving everything behind. "It will still be here when we get back," Porter assured her as they boarded the train. "And you have earned a rest." Helena was bustling and modern compared to Deer Lodge, with electric lights and paved streets. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, and attended a theatrical performance. But what Beatrice enjoyed most was simply having uninterrupted time with Porter, talking late into the night without worrying about morning chores or children's needs. "You ever regret it?" she asked him one evening as they sat in their hotel room. "Tying yourself to a woman as stubborn as me, taking on all the challenges of ranch life." Porter pulled her close. "Not for a single moment. You gave me something I had been searching for without knowing it. A purpose, a partner, a home. Everything I have, everything I am, is better because of you." "I spent so long trying to prove I did not need anyone," Beatrice reflected. "I thought independence meant isolation. You showed me that real strength is knowing when to stand alone and when to reach for someone's hand. You taught me a few things too. You showed me what true courage looks like, what it means to rebuild after loss, how to be a real partner, not just someone who wants to take care of things for someone else, but someone who shares the work and the worry equally." They returned to the ranch refreshed and eager to see their children. Tommy had grown what seemed like inches in just a week, and Elizabeth had learned a new word. The hands had managed perfectly well, proving once again that delegating was not the same as shirking responsibility. As the 1890s approached, the West was changing. Towns were growing, railroads expanding, the wild frontier gradually giving way to something more settled and civilized. But on the Nichols ranch, life maintained a rhythm that felt both timeless and evolving. Tommy, now in his early teens, was developing into a skilled horseman under Porter's guidance. Elizabeth, sharp as a tack at 10 years old, had declared her intention to study business and maybe even go to university someday. Beatrice encouraged both children's ambitions, determined that they would have choices she had not even known existed at their age. On a crisp autumn evening in 1895, Beatrice stood on the porch she had stood on so many times before, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Porter came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different my life is from what I imagined," Beatrice said, leaning back against him. "When Thomas died, I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, proving to everyone that I did not need help or support. I built walls so high I almost could not see over them. And then I came along and kept knocking on those walls until you let me in," Porter said with a smile in his voice. "You did more than that. You showed me that the walls were not protecting me. They were trapping me. You asked me to share my strength instead of hoarding it, and that made all the difference." Inside the house, they could hear Tommy and Elizabeth arguing good-naturedly about something, probably whose turn it was to help with dinner. Beyond the house, the ranch sprawled in all directions, a testament to years of hard work and careful stewardship. "You ever miss it?" Porter asked. "The way things were before, when you answered to no one, made every decision alone?" Beatrice considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, but I would not trade what we have built together for anything. This life, this partnership, our children, all of it is better than anything I could have created alone. Even when I leave my muddy boots by the door, even then. Though I wish you would remember to take them off on the porch like I have asked you 1,000 times." Porter laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Some things never change. And some things do. That is the beauty of it." They stood together as the sun completed its descent, the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Beatrice thought about the younger woman she had been, so determined to need nothing and no one. That woman had been strong, but she had also been lonely in ways she had not admitted even to herself. Opening her heart to Porter had not made her weak or dependent. It had multiplied her strength, just as he had said all those years ago. Together they had built something greater than either could have achieved alone. They had created a home, raised children, and proven that partnership and independence were not opposing forces but complementary ones. "I love you," Beatrice said softly. "Thank you for being stubborn enough to keep trying when I kept pushing you away. I love you too. Thank you for eventually letting me in." "Eventually," Beatrice said with a laugh. "You make it sound like it took forever. Only because it did. But you were worth the wait." Inside, the children were calling for them, and there were evening chores still to be done. But for a moment longer, Beatrice and Porter stood together in the gathering darkness, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, even when they had not known they were searching for it. The years that followed were full of the ordinary moments that make a life extraordinary. Birthdays and holidays, good years and hard years, moments of worry and moments of joy. Tommy eventually took over much of the daily horse operation, proving to have inherited his mother's eye for quality and his father's patience with training. Elizabeth did go to university, studying business and mathematics, before returning to help modernize the ranch's accounting and business practices. Both children eventually married and started families of their own, building houses on ranch land so their children could grow up knowing the same mountains and meadows that had shaped them. Beatrice and Porter became grandparents, delighting in the role while still maintaining active involvement in running the ranch. On their 25th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Beatrice looked around the table and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. She had been so certain, all those years ago, that she needed to stand alone. She had equated independence with isolation, strength with refusing help. Porter had taught her differently. He had shown her that true partnership did not diminish either person but elevated both. That sharing burdens made them lighter, and sharing joys made them sweeter. That love did not require surrendering yourself, but rather finding someone who encouraged you to be more fully yourself than you could be alone. "Speech," Tommy called out, raising his glass. "Father, you must have something to say after putting up with Mother for 25 years. Porter stood, taking Beatrice's hand and pulling her up beside him. "I could talk about the ranch and everything we have built here. I could talk about you children and how proud we are of the people you have become. But mostly I want to talk about your mother." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm, but she did not pull away. "When I met Beatrice, she was the most fiercely independent person I had ever encountered. She had survived loss, rebuilt her life, and created something remarkable through sheer determination and skill. She did not need anyone, and she was not shy about making that clear." Porter's eyes found hers, warm with love and laughter. "But I fell in love with her anyway. Not because I wanted to change her or rescue her or take over what she had built, but because I saw in her a strength that inspired me to be better. I asked her not to give up that independence but to share it, to let me stand beside her instead of making her stand alone." He raised his glass. 25 years later, I can say that was the best decision either of us ever made. To Beatrice, who taught me that the strongest people are not those who never need help, but those who know when to accept it. To partnership, to love, and to the next 25 years. "To the next 25 years," everyone echoed, and Beatrice blinked back tears. Later that night, after the guests had left and the house was quiet, Beatrice and Porter sat together in the living room. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "You think we did all right?" Beatrice asked. "With the children, the ranch, all of it," Porter took her hand. "I think we did better than all right. Look at what we have created, Beatrice. Not just the physical ranch, but the family, the life, the legacy. Our children are good people who know how to work hard and love deeply. The ranch is thriving and will continue to thrive for generations. We have built something lasting." "We have," Beatrice agreed. "Together." "Together," Porter echoed, "the way it was always meant to be." As they sat in comfortable silence, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the young widow determined to prove she needed no one, to the woman who had learned that strength came in many forms, she had not surrendered her independence by marrying Porter. She had expanded it, finding in partnership a freedom she had never known in isolation. The ranch continued to operate successfully well into the new century. Beatrice and Porter gradually stepped back from daily management, content to advise and support, while their children took on more responsibility. They spent their later years enjoying each other's company, traveling occasionally, and spoiling their grandchildren outrageously. Old Bill lived to be 93, sharp-witted until the end, still telling stories about the early days of the ranch. When he passed peacefully in his sleep, the entire community came to pay their respects to a man who had been part of the ranch's foundation. Beatrice and Porter celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by 3 generations of family. They had weathered droughts and blizzards, economic downturns and personal losses. Through it all, they had remained partners in the truest sense, sharing burdens and joys equally. "Do you remember what you told me that first night in the barn?" Beatrice asked Porter as they sat together on the porch, watching another Montana sunset. They were both in their 70s now, their bodies slower but their minds still sharp. "I told you that you did not have to carry every burden alone," Porter said. "That sharing your strength would not diminish it but multiply it. You were right, about everything. I was so busy trying to prove I did not need anyone that I almost missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me." Porter squeezed her hand. "We found each other at exactly the right time. You needed to prove to yourself that you could stand alone before you could choose to stand together. And I needed to learn what real partnership looked like. I love you, Porter Nichols. Thank you for being patient with a stubborn widow who thought she knew everything. I love you, Beatrice Nichols. Thank you for taking a chance on a drifter looking for something more than he knew how to ask for." They sat together as the sun set behind the mountains, 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. The ranch would continue long after they were gone, managed by children and grandchildren who had learned from their example that strength and partnership were not opposing forces but complementary ones. Beatrice passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, Porter holding her hand. She had lived a full, rich life, building something lasting both in the physical ranch and in the family she had raised. Porter followed her 2 years later, his heart having never quite recovered from losing his partner of more than 50 years. They were buried on a hillside overlooking the ranch, their graves marked by simple headstones that bore their names and the years of their lives. But their real legacy was not in stone but in the thriving ranch, the successful children and grandchildren, and the example they had set of what true partnership could be. Years later, when great-grandchildren asked about the founders of the ranch, they were told the story of a widow who thought she needed no one and a cowboy who loved her strength enough to ask her to share it. They were told how independence and partnership had combined to create something stronger than either could be alone. They were told about love that respected, supported, and elevated rather than diminished or controlled. And the ranch continued, generation after generation, built on the foundation of 2 people who had learned that the greatest strength is not in standing alone but in choosing the right person to stand beside.